It's a remake. It's a remaster. It's a slight graphical upgrade selling for $60. Are all remakes remasters, or are all remasters remakes? Or is this a Kleenex situation? What constitutes the labeling of these two seemingly interchangeable words that will get you called out on Twitter for being a moron no matter what? Or could they just all be ports of varying degrees? Also, reboots? No, we're not talking about reboots. Unless we're talking about requels. Yes, that's a real word. How the hell did we get into this mess, and where do we draw the line? Well, let's go through the history of ports, remakes, and remasters, the good instances, the bad instances, and their overall effect on the gaming industry. And when I say the gaming industry, I mean Nintendo. But before we do any of that, let me speedrun explain the differences between ports, remakes, and remasters. A port is when one game is made playable on a console it was not initially intended for. Examples include Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch, Twilight Princess on the Wii, and Captain Toad Treasure Tracker on the Switch and 3DS. They are very popular on new systems as a way to upgrade the game library, especially when the new console is lacking backwards compatibility. They're usually accompanied with new content as a way to get old players excited about old games. A great example of this is New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe that included new levels and power-ups. They may have also been tweaked when ported, like how Twilight Princess flipped its map around to make it more accessible to right-handed players when coming to the Wii. Next are remasters. Remasters are games that are improved to perform and usually look better on newer hardware. They are the exact same game, usually with just small upgrades. Examples include Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Wind Waker HD, and Metroid Prime Remastered. These games are enhanced ports, not usually content-wise, but visually. Then we have remakes. Remakes are not ports like the other two. They are remade from the ground up. Examples include Super Mario All-Stars on the SNES, the Pokemon remakes, and the new Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake. Unlike remasters, these games are not identical to the originals, and are, as the name says, remade. All of these games' goals are to get new audiences to play old games. They just take different approaches. Now that you know the difference between them, let's quickly go over the history of remarketed games on the Nintendo Switch. Also, as a general term going forward, I'm just going to be referring to all of these games as remarketed, as that's what they are. They're old games reintroduced into the market. Of the 100 first-party physically released games on the Nintendo Switch, 25% of them are remarketed games. Now, not every remarketed game is built the same. Some are great value, adding onto the game through bonus content not seen in the original release, while others are pretty lazily put together and are being sold for a price way above their weight class. So I'm going to give 3 case studies on how to do each subjugation of remarketed games correctly. First, let's take a look at ports. When it comes to ports, the greatest example of going above and beyond to make a game truly worth its price years down the line is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This game came out in 2014 and is more alive than most games that came out this decade. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was already a pretty great game on the Wii U. It had DLC out the wazoo with great tracks and beautiful visuals, but it had some very glaring flaws like its battle mode. When Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was ported to the Switch, all of the annoying flaws of the original release on the Wii U were fixed up, and we were joined with new content in the form of characters and a revamped battle mode. This isn't even taking into account the Booster Course Pass, which injected this game with even more content that has kept this game in the public eye for almost a decade now. Now, what would a bad port look like? Well, something that takes little time to stand out from its original release, and being sold at a price similar to newer releases. Now, fortunately, the Switch has actually been pretty good when it comes to pricing ports accordingly, but when it comes to remastered games, I wouldn't say we were as lucky. 3 interesting examples for remasters, in my opinion, are Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Metroid Prime Remastered, and Skyward Sword HD. I believe this category is by far the hardest one to correctly price. It's not quite a port because they did go in and make it all pretty for a newer console, but not quite worthy of a remake price because, well, they didn't remake it. So why do I think these 3 games are interesting? Well, because they're so different from one another. 3D All-Stars by far had the most bang for its buck, shoving 3 all-time Mario games into a bundle of $5.99. Even though they didn't add too much new content, I still think that's a great price. Metroid Prime Remastered is your classic remaster, not doing anything fancy except boosting the graphics and released at $3.99. Again, that's pretty solid. But then we get Skyward Sword HD. And besides the HD graphics and the welcomed addition of a motion controlless playthrough, this game sold for a full $59.99. This was pretty controversial at the time, and I would still say it is. A 10-year-old game with basically zero new content selling the same as games like Breath of the Wild is just insanity. But also, you don't have to buy it. Is it scummy by Nintendo? Probably, but if there's demand there, Nintendo's gonna capitalize, and if people buy it, that's just what they're gonna keep doing. If backwards compatibility isn't there, games just go obsolete, and the companies will jump on that. Then finally, remakes. As I said before, remakes involve rebuilding the game from the ground up. This can be a very time-consuming and expensive process, so it would make sense that remade games would usually be priced higher. Let's discuss 3 games coming out soon that deserve a deep dive into their pricing to see if it's justified. I think the pricing of $5.99 is reasonable for Super Mario RPG. Same with Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, even though its price hasn't been announced yet, but I'd be shocked if it wasn't $5.99. Both of these games are full-on adventures, which I think are worth $5.99, and because they're remade, I think that's just a very reasonable price. However, I'm not so convinced by Mario vs. Donkey Kong. While it is a remake, do the new animations really make this game worth $4.99? This is a relatively simple game that doesn't seem to offer much new content. Comparing its price to something like Metroid Prime Remastered is pretty wild, because according to Nintendo, that game is supposedly worth $10 less than Mario vs. Donkey Kong. I'm sorry to offend all the Mario vs. Donkey Kong fans, I'm super glad you guys are getting this game, but you can't be serious saying that this game is worth $10 more than Metroid Prime. That's just not true. That's just false. Well, here we are. After all of that, what did we learn? What is the purpose of a remarketed game? I think I can sum it all up in one sentence: to boost a console library with minimal amounts of effort. Is that harsh? Maybe a bit. It isn't the worst thing in the world. I see the argument all the time that Nintendo is failing to create new games and are just instead reselling games from the past as if they were new games. And while I would say their marketing might lead you to believe that, remarketing games doesn't actually take as much effort as making a new game. Shocking, right? Maybe at tops, all the effort put into remarketed games could have left us with maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 new games, but financially and logically, that just makes no sense. Having 25 already proven great games on your system just makes so much more sense than 2 or 3 new ones. But where the controversy, in my opinion, stems from is that these games are made unplayable on current hardware by the very company reselling them. These are games whose console they stopped supporting and selling and left in the metaphorical Disney vault, waiting for the day in which they could resell them for a quick buck. I understand it's not quite the same as movies, as different games require different needs. However, Nintendo Switch Online has already proven that in-house emulation is already a thing they can do. If they wanted to release a GameCube online service, they could. However, they're not going to, because they know they can sell these games at close to full price and see no repercussions. So, what's my solution? Well, in my perfect world, every console would be backwards compatible. If that wasn't possible, backwards emulation should be. With proof of purchase, every game ever sold on a Nintendo platform should be able to be re-downloaded and put into your game library if you bought it in the past. Why is it that games are the only creative pieces of media that just get left behind once technology moves on? Music moved from CDs to digital, movies moved from DVDs to digital, video games are moving in that direction, but since most developers are also the publishers, they're able to just keep these classic games in the vault and make a big deal about them once they return to new hardware. But, it can't all be bad, right? Nintendo isn't purposely being evil. Absolutely not. It's just my job to be dramatic on the internet. I think most remarketed games are great. Some of my favorite games on the Switch are in fact not even native to this console. I think they're a great idea to get new eyes on old games that most people might have not tried before. So that's why I wanted to chat about this. Since this is a pretty debatable subject, I would love to hear from all of you in the comments to see where your heads are at. But before I finish, let's quickly talk about the future of these games. While most of y'all have probably heard by now, the Switch is nearing the end of its life cycle. With a new console supposedly on the horizon, what remarketed games could we see on that next system? And how will they differ from the ones on the Switch? I think the biggest change by far will be the lack of ports. The Switch has specifically been notorious for Wii U ports, but I think that honestly made sense, since they were moving from disc games to cartridge games, and because they were trying to revive their brand. But I'm convinced that the next console has to be a Switch 2 or something like it. Backwards compatibility is a must for this next console. And after all the games you already remarketed on the Switch, it would just be abhorrent to not allow backwards compatibility on this next console. It would honestly be evil. But I don't think remakes or remasters will slow down. There's just no reason to. More games equals more money, and games makes Nintendo money. It's just that simple. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go check this video right here talking about Nintendo's biggest missed opportunities to see what else I like to complain about. Also, be sure to hit subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.